Thank you very much, and thank you, Bill Muldoon. And the only thing I might add is if you can campaign as well as you can speak, I want to sign you up right now. But thank you very much. And John Ashbrook was a dear friend of mine. I was elected to the Congress in 1976. Yeah, he was there. He was an inspiration to all of us. And perhaps you probably don't know this. My father was the John Ashbrook presidential chairman of Indiana in 1972. So the Quayle family goes back a long time to John Ashbrook. And he was a person that I think inspired all of us who wanted to stay committed to principle. There was never any doubt where John Ashbrook stood. And to have his political career terminated abruptly and early was very sad. I'm convinced to this day, had he been able to continue on that campaign, we would have gotten rid of Howard Metzenbaum a lot sooner than we did. As was mentioned, I did not show up when I was expected to be here in the first, I think it was the first week in December. I was in the hospital, Indiana University. Doctors diagnosed that what I had was pulmonary emboli, which is serious business, and so I was unable to come. I'm glad to be here now. When I was released from the hospital, I had a press conference, and there was probably about 20 press folks there. And I'm sure I was preparing for the press conference and going over all the possible questions that they would ask me. I was certain they'd ask me about my health when I'd start campaigning again. Probably ask a question about the Republican Congress, maybe a question about Newt Gingrich. There's one question I had prepared for, but they didn't ask. I actually thought that they would ask me how to spell pulmonary emboli. And I want you to know I was prepared. But things have begun to change a little bit for me already. We were in Wisconsin the other day, and the parking lot attendant stopped us as we were driving in. He says, "I'm sorry, this is for reserved parking only," looking right at me. And I said, "You know, can I have a place to park?" He says, "No." He just stopped us, and finally somebody introduced us, let us in. And I said, "Boy, what a difference 24 hours makes." Some of you have remarked at the reception of I was playing golf out at Pebble Beach, and there's a lot of celebrities out there, and spent a lot of time signing autographs. And I was signing this one autograph for this young lady. She gave me her program, and I was just getting ready to, start my D, and she grabbed the program back from me. She says, "Sorry," she says, "there's Clint Eastwood. I want to go get his autograph." John Ashbrook would expect me to give you my objective, unbiased opinion of the Clinton administration. So, I will. After listening to his speech to the joint session of Congress several weeks ago, after his speech, the Democrats asked for a rebuttal. So that's where we sort of start this evening. But where I'd like to start is what happened in November 8th, 1994, where we had a tremendous victory from our perspective. The Republicans gained the control of the Congress for the first time in 40 years. And perhaps it was inevitable. The American people had witnessed change all around the world. The Soviet Union had disintegrated. You now had Russia independent. You had a duly elected president of Russia for the first time in a millennium. The Baltic nations, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, free and independent. Eastern and Central Europe had gotten rid of the yoke of communism and socialism, replaced it with democracy and a more market-oriented approach. The Berlin Wall had come crashing down. And so the American people had seen this change all around the world, and they said, well, if they can do it over there, we can do it here too. And they did. It was a remarkable election where there was no defeated Republican incumbent for governor, senator, or U.S. House of Representatives. And that is truly a precedent that I'd like to keep. I'm not... But as we look at this change that took place, I think it's important to understand the debate that we had and perhaps where we are, and more importantly, where are we going. If you had to step back a moment and ask yourself this question, what was the central point of debate in that 1994 campaign? And I think that you would answer, as I have, that the central point of debate was the Clinton administration's approach to health care. I mean, that was the major legislative initiative. And their approach, as we found out, was essentially to have the government run 17% of our GDP, i.e. the health care system. And it wasn't until you, the American people, started speaking up about this legislation that Congress essentially changed their mind. And because of that changing their mind, a lot of them did not return, and we now have a new Congress, and perhaps we are signaling that a big government approach to fundamental problems that we have is ending. Because there is absolutely no doubt about it that they had the momentum. I can remember his speech to the joint session of Congress in the summer of 1993. And it was a good speech that he made. He outlined the 6 principles. Matter of fact, many Republicans left that evening saying, well, this isn't too bad. We might want to have to take a look at it, knowing full well there are some problems in the healthcare delivery system. We've got to deal with the pre-existing condition issue, the portability issue, the deduction for self-employed, and we ought to look at the medical liability system if we want true reform. But he gave that speech, and it was a memorable speech in the fact that that was the one where they had the wrong speech in the teleprompter. You remember that? The next day that we found out that they had inserted the wrong speech in the teleprompter. And for the first 6 or 7 minutes, Bill Clinton had to look down on his text here, which is backup, as they were trying to get the right speech in the teleprompter. And I can remember him turning to Al Gore right before he started speaking. And I was with Marilyn in Indianapolis. I said, well, what in the heck is he talking to Al Gore for right before he speaks? Well, now we know. He told Al Gore to fix the teleprompter. George Bush never gave me that responsibility. You know, there's a lot of heavy lifting being Vice President of the United States. And they have now taken this to a new extreme. But after that speech, there was tremendous momentum. Republicans, as I said, even parroted some of the things that were said that evening. The Democrats were obviously on board. The media, they were excited. Academia was primarily behind. You had a lot of the interest groups that are all ready to go. But something happened. And what happened was that the American people started asking a lot of questions. And the more questions they asked, the less they liked the government-run healthcare approach. And as a result, this piece of legislation, which many predicted was going to pass, none of it passed. Not even part of it. There was no compromise. They said, fine, we will take our case to the American people. And the Congress said, okay, fine. And we went out and we had that debate. And what won the debate was that we want to invest our confidence and to transfer power back to the people rather than investing our confidence in keeping the power in Washington. That was the debate, and the American people answered it. And now our challenge is to move on, to pick up where we are, look at the success that we have had in some areas and to project what we're going to do in the future. And we have made some have had some success over the past few years. I can remember beginning a dialogue on the issue of family values several years ago. And at that time, there was great controversy, great ridicule for the statement that it would be in the best interest of our children to be born and raised in an intact family. Not that single parents and single mothers don't love their children and can't raise their children. Many of them do, and they all want to. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to look at putting your children first, that having that intact family and having a mother and a father, and I say this to the fathers of the room, raising a child is not just a mother's responsibility, it is a father's responsibility as well. And for that, there was this tremendous outcry and controversy. But look at the progress. Today, it is no longer debated as being controversial. It's, what are we going to do about it? It is not just Republicans, it's Democrats. It's not just conservatives, it's liberals as well. We may have different approaches, but at least we're discussing what we can do for our families. And so we have made progress. We've made progress in the area of discussing the issue of competitiveness. When I was George Bush's vice president, I headed his competitiveness council. And in that competitiveness council, we made sure that rules and regulations promulgated by the federal bureaucrats were kept at a minimum. And we said no, 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 no. And they would send them down to the White House, and we'd say, okay, give us a risk-benefit analysis. Give us an economic impact statement. Are you talking about a lot of risk, or are you talking about a 1% risk? We want to know before we're going to ask the private sector to start complying with these rules and regulations. Unfortunately, the first act of business that Bill Clinton took as president was to abolish the Competitiveness Council. But you know what? The new Congress, the Republican Congress, now has a couple subcommittees that have taken on the responsibilities of our Competitiveness Council, and they're doing better than what we did because they're now hauling the bureaucrats and the regulators before Congress and saying, it's a new day, folks, that we want to change the rules. It's no longer just push as many regulations as possible out the door. We want you to think about these regulations and to think about what they do to the private sector. And this, in fact, is a huge change. We've made progress in the area of legal reform. A couple years ago, went down to the American Bar Association, spoke to the lawyers. I happen to be a lawyer. I'm married to a lawyer. So, I mean, I love lawyers. But I made this observation that America has 5% of the world's population, but America has 70% of the world's lawyers. We have a legal system that costs us $300 billion a year. We have a legal system on the civil side that there are 20 million lawsuits that are filed each and every year. And many of those lawsuits that are filed are frivolous and should never be filed in the first place. And I would imagine everyone in this room, perhaps, or certainly knows someone, that has been the target of a frivolous lawsuit. Well, there's one direct way that we can take care of a lot of those frivolous lawsuits, and that is to pass a law that says this: the loser of the lawsuit pays the winner's legal fees. And by doing that, you will stop a lot of this nonsense and a lot of these frivolous lawsuits. But what are we going to do now? What do we want to look forward to in this Congress? And they have made a lot of progress thus far. In these first few weeks, they have begun to pass the contract with America that they had. They passed the first law that said, and it's just a radical proposal. I don't know whoever thought of this one. I mean, the fact that the Congress should live under the same laws that you and I live under. I mean, they passed that law. I mean, it's a good law, but you would think that that might have been passed before. And Bill Clinton signed it. They're in the process of passing the unfunded mandates. They're in the process of hopefully getting this balanced budget amendment through, although in the Senate it's a very close vote. Now they're talking about exempting Social Security. You can't put that in the Constitution, that you're going to have a balanced budget amendment and then exempt Social Security. I mean, it's ridiculous. If you're going to have a balanced budget amendment, pass the balanced budget amendment and then let them do what they say that they want to do, and that is balance the budget. Look at taxes. I think it's time, and this Congress, they don't do it now. They may, after the 1996 elections, take a serious, I know Bill Archer is interested in this, a serious look at the progressive income tax system that we have. Now, the income tax system was put into place at around the turn of the century, just after the turn of the century, and the rate of taxation was 1% for those that made over $3,000, and if you were married, it was over $4,000, and that is equivalent today to about $35,000 or $40,000, where the 1% rate started, and that was the only rate that we had. And today, there are too many Americans, when you add your federal, state, and local taxes together, are paying about 50%. So that means you work half the time for the government and the other half for yourself and your family. The federal tax code has 10,000 pages of rules and regulations that tell you what deductions you can take, exemptions you can take, tax preferences that are available to you. 10,000. There is absolutely no way, unless you have professional help or happen to be an accountant or a tax lawyer, that you can have any comprehension what's in that tax code. And I believe that the time has arrived that we take a serious look at replacing this progressive income tax system and the tax system that we have with all the preferences, 10,000 pages worth, and say that the American people will support a low, unified, fair, flat tax for all Americans. As we look at Washington tonight, and you see what is going on with this Foster nomination, you just sort of shake your head in somewhat disbelief. First of all, when you nominate a Surgeon General, you'd think you'd nominate someone that would be a unifier, a person that could bring the country together. But this White House obviously did not do its homework. They didn't know who Dr. Foster was. They didn't know his background. They hadn't even done an internal White House check before they sent the nomination up. They hadn't done an FBI check before his nomination was sent up. They just said, hey, we've got to hurry up and get this nomination up there. And it's not Republicans so much as Democrats are loudly complaining about the sheer incompetence that is coming out of the White House. I said on Meet the Press the other day, I said, do you realize that we are in the 3rd year of the Clinton administration, and you have that type of incompetence? It's amazing. It's appalling. Now, this is the nomination to the Surgeon General. Let's think about something that is truly important. Let's think about the recent issue, or the recent revelation in the media that nuclear weapons from Russia are being transferred to Iran. Let's ask ourselves the question on dealing with North Korea and the agreement that we have there to try to stop its proliferation, or China and how it's moving missile technology to Pakistan and to Iran and to other places. Ask ourselves about the Middle East. If Iran is moving to obtain nuclear weapons, Iraq won't be far behind. Libya might, in fact, be able to get a hold of them. And then ask yourself this: what about the competence in dealing with those issues? And those are life and death issues. And these are issues in foreign policy that can have a lasting impact for a generation if it is mishandled. And we are finding out all too late that when you elect a president of the United States, it helps to have a president who has experience, who understands the nuances of foreign policy. Remember the bumper sticker slogan, "The economy stupid"? Well, it's more than just the economy stupid. It is foreign policy. It is international affairs. And as one American citizen, I have to express my alarm and concern for what is, in fact, truly going on in the White House in the area of competence. I'm not talking about their approach to health care. I'm not talking about, I think they've cut far too much in defense. I'm not talking about the appointment of a Surgeon General. I'm talking about just competence. And these are issues that are happening today. I don't know what the future of Boris Yeltsin is going to be. I don't know what Russia is going to do 6 months from now or a year from now, but we better watch it. But it doesn't give you a lot of confidence that the foreign policy team there, if you have a crisis, will know what to do about it. I tried to bring this up in my debate with then Senator Al Gore, talking about if, in fact, we had an international crisis in the next 4 years, who do you want to manage it? Unfortunately, we only had the microphone for an hour and a half, and there wasn't that reflection that was necessary. And now we're learning a tough lesson. So let us just hope and pray that we can make it through the next couple years without a major international crisis, because I don't know what they would do. And I don't know what the response would be. And when you get into foreign policy, of course you're going to support your president. You have to. You simply can't start to pull the plug on these very sensitive issues, but it doesn't give me, nor do I think it would give you, a lot of confidence. But we're going to have an election in a little less than 2 years. Everyone in this room could aptly be described as the so-called silent majority. You remember how they used to refer to us as the silent majority? The people that took care of their families, played by the rules, paid their taxes, went to church, took care of themselves, didn't ask for a lot of help, the silent majority. Well, my friends, I think it's time that this silent majority, which we have been called, become the unsilent majority. We were certainly unsilent in November 1994 because our voices were heard. We participated. We let them know what we wanted. And so we became unsilent, and we found out we can make a difference. The reason that I got into politics when I was 29 years old running for Congress. I was fortunate enough to be elected by the people of the 4th District to make a difference. And you all have made a difference right here. John Ashbrook made a difference during his great career in the Congress and his commitment to public service. Not by being silent, but by being unsilent. Speaking up, standing firm, speaking out, taking our government back, letting our voices be heard. We don't have to shout. The only thing we have to do is to communicate. And as we communicate and debate, we will be able to have a great deal of success. As for me, I have made a decision about 1996, which you are well aware, and I've decided that it is not appropriate, or I should say I decided not to run in 1996 for president because I chose to put my family first. It was a very introspective, personal decision. But it was the right decision for me at this time. And having made that decision, I can tell you this. I know I'll be a better husband. I'll be a better father. And maybe someday a better president. But for now, it's time to move on. It's time that we all stick together, stay in the arena. We have much yet to do. We have to do it for our families. We have to do it for our neighborhoods. We have to do it for our country. So we will stay involved. We will stand firm for our convictions, our values, and we will be the unsilent majority that will work to take back our government. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, the microphones, one is there and one is over here. So those of you that have a question or two or three or an answer, please journey to the microphone. Yes, ma'am.
I have none of the above.
Oh.
I just wanted to tell you that I grew up in Huntington, Indiana.
Oh, my gosh.
And
Where did you live there?
I lived in the country. I went to Lancaster.
Oh, you went to Lancaster, okay.
But my high school sweetheart was your high school golf course coach. Do you remember Paul Buzzard?
Oh, Paul Buzzard. He was your high school sweetheart?
Yes.
You look a lot younger than that.
Oh. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you. Yes.
Mr. Vice President, there were many Americans who felt that in the presidential race you would best represent their views. Now that you've elected to remove yourself from that competition, which of the likely remaining Republican candidates do you feel will best represent their views?
It's very interesting. Almost before I made the announcement, which was at 3:30 on Thursday, they were out claiming that they had my supporters, which would lead you to believe that they were going to advance our values and our issues. Let me say this. Each and every one of them will respond to the issues that we have raised over the years, and I hope will respond to the issues that I intend to raise during the presidential campaign. They need to address the cultural issues. You simply can't ignore the cultural issues and to run for president. They're too important. Crime, welfare, families, neighborhoods. You have to ask yourself the question, what is the character and spirit of the American people today? And I can tell you on an individual basis, the spirit has always been there. On a character basis, if you look at just raw statistics, you sort of have to wince a bit with all the violent crime indicators going up, teenage suicide going up, child abuse going up, spouse abuse going up. We have more abortions in our nation's capital than we do live births. Homicide rate going up. So all of those Bill Bennett's cultural indicators are going in the wrong direction. And we better start talking about how we're going to address it. And you're not going to legislate morality. You're not going to pass some law to say, quit abusing your child. But you're going to have to use the bully pulpit, and you're going to have to speak to the American people about responsibility rather than just rights and entitlements. So often in today's society, you demand this and you demand that, and the entitlement programs. They better address the entitlement programs, because if they don't, by the year 2015, I believe, if nothing is done, think of this. The entire federal budget will be consumed by entitlements and interest on the national debt. Nothing else. Nothing for defense, nothing for transportation, nothing for environment, nothing for job training, nothing for education, nothing. 2 items by the year 2015. And so they have to address these issues, and they will. Which one will address them the best? You want me to make an endorsement right here? I think I better wait on this one. I'll tell you, I can just tell you where they are as far as just a horse race thing. Clearly Bob Dole is well ahead of the pack. He is comfortably ahead. I was his closest challenger. Now that I am not going to run in '96, he has even a larger lead. And the other two that will be talked about the most will be Phil Graham and Lamar Alexander. And it seems that the field is pretty well narrowed at this stage to those three. There'll probably be 3 or 4 others that will get into the race. But the media, they like to winnow this thing down, and they want to get it down to 3 is fine, or 4. They don't want much more than that because they can't handle it. So they've got 3. There may be another entry. There's been some discussion of maybe Pete Wilson entering from California. I'm not convinced that he'll do it. Colin Powell, who was a speaker here, I'm not convinced that he'll do it. There's been some others that would have a sizable national following that have been suggested, but I just don't think they'll do it. So that's about where we are. And let me just be very clear. Bill Clinton will be a one-term president. There's no doubt about that. I believe that it's possible, not probable yet, but possible, that the Republicans will know who their presidential nominee is going to be before the Democrats know who their presidential nominee is going to be. Yes.
Mr. Vice President, it seems to me that Dick Lugar personifies a lot of the qualifications that you mentioned earlier and that seemed to be just the sort of person we'd want to run for President of the United States. If you were giving him 3 quick suggestions how he might accomplish that, what would they be?
Well, first he has to decide that he's going to run. I have not spoken to him, but if he is, he needs to run, or needs to announce it. He'll have to go to Iowa and New Hampshire soon to begin to lay down somewhat of an organization because of the late start, and he'll also have to start raising money. Those are the 3 things. Yeah.
You talked about presidential candidates, you talked about Just kidding, I'll do 20 minutes on that guy. The Democrats talk about the 12 years of Reagan and Bush. Dr. Limbaugh says that looking backwards in a few years, we're going to talk about the 8 years of Reagan and Bush and the 8 years of Bush and Clinton. And my question to you is that when did you realize that Bush was not a true believer to the conservative cause?
Well, let me try to disabuse you of that. George Bush was and is conservative. He may not have grown up and developed politically as a movement conservative, but he was conservative on national security. There's no doubt about that. Matter of fact, he was more skeptical of Gorbachev than Reagan was at the end. He was very much oriented toward the market economy. I can tell you one example where we were trying to get him to compromise on this family leave bill, to come out and say, look, this thing's going to happen, that employers should give women time off to have their children. Just compromise with it. You can argue till the cows come home that it's, government shouldn't be doing this. It's going to happen. Let's get our version in this and get it over with. He wouldn't do it. He flat out wouldn't do it. Dug his heels in. I was surprised. He says, no, we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't have any of these things. I said, I agree with you, but there's a time when this thing is not going to make that much difference, and quite frankly, we ought to be encouraging employers to do this in the first place, and most of them do, so it's not going to impact very many employers at all. So he was conservative. What he didn't do, he didn't have the speeches, nor the communication, nor the rhetoric of Ronald Reagan. I mean, Ronald Reagan led by great speeches. He was a great communicator. He would lay out a vision for America, and he thoroughly enjoyed and relished giving speeches, and that was part of his leadership. George Bush did not particularly care for that, and his leadership was being a competent conservative president, and he felt that was the best way to lead. You can argue which way was better. From a public relations point of view, Reagan was quite successful in articulating this vision, but the differences between Ronald Reagan and George Bush, and I know them both very well, minuscule. There really was not that much different. Difference in rhetoric, difference in approach, difference in style, but not difference in substance.
Still not convinced?
Well, I'm going to have to work on you. Yeah.
Mr. Vice President, if the wireless will work back here, my father-in-law, who's in a wheelchair, has a question for you.
Okay.
Vice President Quayle, and is a fellow Indianian from Tippecanoe Lake, and your emphasis on foreign relations, I really think that Dick Lugar, with all of his experience in the Foreign Relations Committee, would be an ideal president.
Well,
do you think he will run?
He has not talked to me about it. He hasn't told me he's going to run. I talked to him a couple times about me running, and we had a conversation about me running for president, but he's never told me that he's going to run. If he is, and I've read that he is interested in it, I've read comments from his staff, and he is going to New Hampshire, I think, next Sunday to make his speech there. But until he tells me that he's going to run, and tells others that he's going to do it, you've got to make that move first. And when he makes that move and makes that determination, then he really does have to begin to organize in New Hampshire and Iowa and begin to raise money. He's a very qualified individual. I've got deep respect for Dick Lugar. He's very gifted in the area of foreign policy. He's on the Foreign Affairs Committee. He's chairman of the Agriculture Committee. So the decision is his.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, in '92, Ross Perot was a real problem for us. Do you feel that the efforts that Haley Barbour's made in the last couple of years will protect our flanks this time around?
I've given up trying to predict what Ross Perot's going to do. If he decides to run this time, he'll be certainly less of a factor than he was the last time. He hurt us immeasurably the last time. He really did. He got 19% of the vote. Most of that vote was ours. The independents, Democrats that were voting for Perot should have been voting for us. And he took Republicans. He's a Republican businessman from the state of Texas. He hurt us. Now, if he runs this time, he won't get 19%. He'll probably get 7 or 8% if he's lucky. That means that it will be fairly evenly divided, may even hurt Clinton a bit more. But when you're looking about third party or fourth party possibilities, don't forget about our dear friend Jesse Jackson. I think it'd be very wise for him to form a party and to run for president. He needs to run for president as an independent. He doesn't have to go through the Democratic primary. He can just have a little primary of his own he can announce. And he can even do it on Larry King's show. And if in fact he can get all those 50 states to come and beg him to run, then he ought to run. And matter of fact, I'd even donate to that cause.
Mr. Vice President, I believe that most of the people gathered here tonight feel a deep sense of regret about your decision. I would hope that the presence of Bob Dole and others, and not of money, is the real reason for your not running.
Well, it was not money. I can tell you very simply what I did. I put the campaign on one hand, and money's obviously involved in that, and what you have to do, and where you are, and all that. And I put the family on the other hand. You can't have both as a priority. It's one or the other. That's what it's all about. You can be in the Senate, you can be in the House, you can be governor, you can even be, vice president to some extent, and the family can have the priority that it deserves. But it's a choice, and it's a choice that you make in life. It was a difficult decision, but no, I can assure you that money was not the reason. I simply added it all up, as you do when you make these difficult decisions in life. You just sort of get a yellow pad out, put a line down the middle, put it on the top, campaign family, put it all down there, and when you look at it on balance, make a choice. And this time I chose to put my family first, and for me, this time, it was the right decision. Thank you very much.
Hello, Mr. Vice President. How are you doing?
Couldn't be better.
That's good.
Assuming that you're not going to slip me a sidewall here.
No. What I was just going to ask you is, you talked a little bit about wanting to spend more time with your family, and I was going to ask you, do you plan on running for any other office near home, as far as governor of Indiana or anything like that?
Well, I've, as you can imagine, I've been asked that question for the last 3 or 4 days, and I've just basically said, look, let me just have a little time off and to think about what I'm going to do. I need to talk to Marilyn. I've actually been gone because I had this schedule set up. I've been gone since, Saturday. And I was also gone, or traveled Friday, but I was home Friday night. And I just need some time off. There's obviously some interest in that. In the past, I have said, if I run for another office, it'd be for president. I was very firm about that 2 years ago, but the same questions come up, and I've just begged for a little bit of time, and I think everybody certainly understands that as I try to reflect and make a decision on what I do next. The one thing I do want to do is to make sure that our ideas are heard, that our values are supported, and that the Republican Party continues to be the party of less taxes, less regulation, strong defense, family values, and individual liberty. Now, how I will go about making sure that I am heard, I just really haven't decided.
Okay, I was going to ask you something else. In the year probably 2012, I'll be 35. I think that's the age you have to be president, if I'm not mistaken. I was going to ask you if you ever run around then, if I could be your vice president.
You're a wise young man, and we'll certainly think of that. One more here, last one.
Good evening, Mr. Vice President. My name is Richard Semesky from Detroit, Michigan, and I'm very proud to see Dr. Foster's nomination to Surgeon General. And besides the incompetency of the White House, how do you feel about Dr. Foster and his qualifications for that position?
Well, the problem that I have with him, and I don't think he'll be nominated, is the fact that they have misled the Senate. The Senate asked questions, and they just simply misled him about the nominee. You can say, well, that's not Dr. Foster's responsibility, and you shouldn't take it out on the nominee. The fact of the matter is, when you mislead the Senate about a particular nominee, you feel like you have something to hide. I also do not believe that it's a wise decision to appoint someone that is really going to be divisive, and he should be more of a unifier. I do applaud his efforts on waging a crusade, and said he would wage a national crusade on teenage pregnancy. I applaud him for that. And there are probably many things that I would agree with what he would do as Surgeon General. But he is at a position right now when they don't know how many abortions were performed or not performed, the sterilization issue. I mean, you have developed in a situation where this has become a polarizing nomination. And when Surgeon General is, yes, Bill Clinton has the right to appoint. He was elected. But President should appoint somebody as Surgeon General that will really speak to all the people and will not be divisive. So if I was in the Senate, and I would encourage my Republican colleagues, if they have to vote on it, I don't know whether they will or not, they may withdraw the nomination, that they should and vote in opposition for a whole host of reasons. That's all, folks. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, and congratulations to each and every one of you. Thank you.